Ooh, it's a different sound. Oh, okay. All righty. Well, lovely to be back with you again, Bill. I have been reading some of your blog posts in preparation for today. And the first question I had for you is, in a recent one, you talked about the salience network, and you talked about the difference of like focusing on the foreground versus background. I guess I was really interested in this concept, and it's obviously the first I've heard of it. Can you explain a little bit more about it for me and also anybody else that may be listening?
Well, it's neuroscience. It's a rapidly changing field. Um, New techniques being developed and studying every aspect of how the brain processes. And what I find interesting is that the connections I see between what they're discovering and what I've known introspectively all of my life. So, what I've been calling emergency oversimplification procedure, they appear to be calling the default network.
Mm-hmm.
And what I call the observer state, they appear to be calling the executive control network.
Mm-hmm.
So they're kind of anchoring my speculations and practical decisions about how I'm going to run my mind. It's now being backed up by science. So I find that tremendously encouraging. Um, the salience network is the thing that brings us back out of the default network into the executive control network when we realize something in our immediate experience is important and has to be dealt with in a more serious way.
Mm-hmm.
And no flimsy, casual way of dealing with it is going to be satisfactory.
Mm-hmm.
So the salience network acts like a switch, but in general, the idea of salience is uh, top of mind, front of the stack, the
Mm-hmm.
thing that is calling your attention the most. If you're in any kind of dangerous situation, you're not going to be thinking about how your clothes are fitting or anything like that. Uh, so I mean that's a general description of it.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, there's 2 points there. Really interesting, as you say, that it's your mythology and what you've been talking about for years is now being backed by science. And I think this is something you and I have talked about a lot. A lot of what we experience in in our everyday is not always explainable, but we're open to that fact. What do you think that um, says, the fact that science or scientists are now looking into some of these things that probably before they couldn't explain? What do you think that's suggesting?
Well, it's definitely healthy. It's
Hmm.
definitely a good trend. It's causing science to be more open-minded. One of the major things happening in physics today is the absolute recognition that they have to deal with consciousness. They can't just ignore it. They
Hmm.
can't pretend that physics can be understood completely without understanding consciousness.
Hmm.
And that's only in the last couple of years.
Hmm.
And um, there was nothing to suggest that it was heading in that direction.
Hmm.
But bang, here it is. And it's kind of validating that those of us who realized whatever science says, with all due respect and tremendous gratitude for what science has achieved, and it was my first religion, science. Um, at the same time, you had to run your life. You couldn't just, if science wasn't going to proclaim anything one way or another about uh, what you should do about your free will and your willpower and your ability to control your own internal negativity, things that are important, practical
Hmm.
things.
Hmm.
You had to make it up. I mean, if science wasn't going to provide it, you just have to come up with your own heuristics, your own practical proxies for actually knowing what's going on.
Mhm.
If you don't know what's going on, you have to do your best to act uh, as intelligently as you can under the circumstances.
Mhm. I guess I get excited about this prospect of science kind of one being more open to some of these things that we experience, and I guess not that we need that validation, or you and I don't, because we accept that it happens, we don't need science. But I guess I get quite excited about the prospect of science backing it up for those people that might think we're a bit out there and a bit woo woo. What impact do you think having almost this scientific seal of approval almost on some of the concepts that you've been talking about for years, how do you think that will impact other people that need that validation, or almost that science or calculation behind it in order to believe it?
I think that it's going to become easier to uh, make these methods more widespread and adopted and accepted, because there've always been these authorities, authoritarian principles of believing the smartest people, believing the church, believing in science, believing in big institutions, um, and and that's kind of acted as a crutch, where if we ourselves felt small and insignificant, and we didn't believe in ourselves enough, we could at least look up to some role model or an ideal, someone who seemed to us to be smart and strong and doing the right thing. So, science validates um, belief systems, and to the extent that people in, I don't know, let's say between the 1970s and a couple of years ago, um, people who believed in alternative medicine and homeopathic medicine and different new forms of healing, um, they felt that science and pharmaceutical companies and the whole medical system and health insurance and all of that stuff was bad. Those were bad people, and they became somewhat anti-scientific in some of the other ways they thought. I
Mhm.
mean, you saw this during COVID when people were talking about drinking cleaning fluid to to deal with COVID, and arguing against the vaccine because they didn't trust science.
Mhm.
Um, so I think what's happening now is more of a convergence of all of these ideas rather than a black and white
Mhm.
dichotomization of this stuff is good, those people are evil. Um, that whole oversimplification is hopefully on its way out, and more of a synthesis is forming, more open-minded, being able to use diverse ideas and putting them together in new ways, and exploring new possibilities without this kind of mental lockjaw that we've had. And it's not going to disappear overnight. We still have plenty of hate groups and lots of extremism and violence, and it's not it isn't going to flip over
Mhm.
and everything be good all of a sudden. But I think that this is all helpful to what you and I are trying to do, to
Mhm.
have science on our side, and to have even the word God being used by scientists.
Mhm.
It was a Scientific American article recently reporting a conference that had taken place in a university near where I live, at Marist
Mhm.
University. And scientists who both are thinking openly and more accepting of the possibilities of what consciousness is, and people who are proudly calling themselves physicalists,
Mhm.
who are still really wedded to the idea of materialism, and that consciousness can't be can't exist independent of matter, that matter and energy in some way must be producing consciousness. So that, that's the old way of looking at it. And these new people who calling themselves panpsychists are physicists who are more open to consciousness being perhaps more important than matter. So they discussed all these things, and the word God came up a couple of times. It was brought up in a kind of a snide way by the anti-panpsychists, and brought up in more of a, well, if it turns out that consciousness did exist before matter, then probably God exists. That was a phrase that one of them used. So I think all of this is tremendously hopeful. And it makes me more certain than ever that one day it's all going to be much better than it's been. We've had thousands of years of constant warfare and hatreds that still exist and just keep getting worse in some cases. I think it's all going to be washed away by understanding.
Yeah. And interesting there, you're saying about the kind of convergence of these different belief systems or ideologies, or however they want to kind of process what it is that this existence is. We've obviously got our own way of, I guess, reading it, but it's interesting because I believe, and keen for your thoughts, that different people are energetically coded in a different way to almost be receptive to certain messages or certain terminology or certain, I guess it's just the way it's said. And I think you and I connect on a level because we're coded in that way, almost energetically, to understand that. But I'm excited about the convergence of these ideas because I think we're all energetically different and we are receptive to different messages. So I also am optimistic that this conversion of ideas will unlock greater consciousness for all.
The things you say about we're all wired differently are also being validated by science. There's a new paper out in which the way people use their brains is predictive of whether they're more liberal, progressive, or conservative. So those things aren't just based on training or happenstance, but they're based on how the brain is wired. Now, of course, there is neuroplasticity that we can rewire our brains. I think when I was very young, I was very much oriented to logic and reason, and saw emotion as a lesser thing, something less importance. And I've, during my life, been rewired myself, been rewired by external forces or the combination, where it's much more of a balance in my mind, and emotional signals are just as readable and relevant to me as intellectual signals in my own consciousness. And what I also think is that you and I share a degree of awe and wonderment at the universe, at its magicality, and to the extreme materialist scientists, that's all like superstition, and the phrase magical thinking is a derogatory term to them. Whereas people like Arthur C. Clarke have said that if a technology is suitably advanced, there's no way to tell the difference between it and magic. That magic is just very advanced science. It's science we don't understand yet. And to me, the being able to enjoy the awe and wonder and the magic of the universe is a big plus. Like it's like in being able to enjoy art. It's like being able to enjoy music.
Mhm.
It's you know, you get a kind of a buoyed up feeling. You get uplifted by the sense of the majesty and compassion and tenderness of the universe. When you tune into it, you feel it. You feel that you're loved, and there's love everywhere,
Mhm.
and that we're all made of love. Uh, and you don't get that feeling if you rule it out as a possibility.
Exactly. It's whether it's that saying, isn't it? It's whether you believe it can or it can't happen. Like either will be true. And I think that's true for this as well. And you talk of rewiring, and I know that rewiring is definitely possible because, as you said, you've done it, and so have I. And the Natalie sitting in front of you today is very different from the Natalie, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And I think we're all constantly evolving, and we are probably testament to the fact that you can rewire your brain to see this magic and believe in it. And as you've said, it's part of the wonderment is what's coming next. It's kind of like unwrapping a present, really. And I think, and this is where it comes to kind of some people are really attached to what's inside the gift, and I think that is where it takes them out of this state of awe and magic. And it's, I guess, for people that want to believe, and they want to believe that everything's going to be okay, because this is the thing, even in coaching sessions they really struggle with it. It's they want to believe it, they want to believe their inner self, but there's that voice inside saying, no, you need the proof, this doesn't make sense. It's like hardwired them for safety, but actually it's stopping them from feeling this awe and wonderment. What are things that people can do to really, or if they've got that thought there, how do they trust it and how do they embrace it? What would you advise?
Well, again, it's what you said before. It's being open to things
Mhm.
rather than reaching closure that they're definitely right or definitely wrong. Just kind of leaving them there on the drawing board of your mind as a possibility that deserves to be attended to, paid attention to, and the negation of it, that warning voice that doesn't want to be heartbroken again, doesn't, knows what heartbreak feels like, and doesn't want to experience heartbreak, therefore is afraid to trust again.
Mhm.
They trusted someone, they loved someone, they married someone, there was a horrible divorce, now they're disillusioned, whatever it might be.
Mhm.
uh, they need to sit with opposites in their mind without excluding either one,
Mhm.
giving them time and space to reach greater certainty and confidence based on the facts, based on trying things out. Um, it's an old story that I probably tell too often, but um, I wanted to be able to run my life by the scientific method.
Mhm.
But in order to do that, I would have to be two people so I could have a test and control group, and I'm only one person. So I couldn't have a test and control group. I had to, I couldn't do things by pure deduction. I had to use inductive
Mhm.
observation. So what I would do is I would say, okay, um, I've been acting selfishly, and I have a benchmark. I have a baseline of how that's been working. It hasn't been working too badly. The old saying, if you don't ask, you don't get. So I've been kind of pushy lately, and I've been asking, and I've been getting, and so on. Um, but maybe I haven't been thinking enough about win-win and other people winning too. And the win-win idea makes me kind of feel good. So maybe now I'll just try to dial that back a little. And now for a while, I'll act a little bit more unselfishly and see how that works.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I found acting unselfishly, being unselfish, authentically, actually worked better for me and for everybody else. And it just, the whole thing was so much better. I mean, it was tolerable before. I was eking out an existence and, acting in my own best interest because I didn't trust anyone else to really care or look out for me no matter what they said.
Mm-hmm.
And that got me through, but not with flying colors and not with feeling terrific and not with a lot more inspiration and sudden great ideas and the experience of the flow state. All of that came along by testing one thing that I hadn't been doing.
Mm-hmm.
So people can, it doesn't have to be black and white. It doesn't have to be high risk. It can be just, okay, let me just turn the dial a little bit in this direction today and see how that works. Let me give it a few days. Let me try to dial in this direction. Let me be open and not demand knowing in advance stuff that I can't know in advance.
Mm-hmm.
I have to try this stuff out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think it's our ego that almost wants to know. It wants to know it's safe before you take that step or before you course correct a behavior or an action. But actually, that's the one thing you will not get is that confirmation. So it's trusting enough it's that saying, leap and the net will appear, right? You have to trust that it will before you do it. But I think it's our egos, and it could be any example of, like you say, behavior that you want to course correct. But it starts with trying it once, doesn't it?
It does. And you could take, a baby step. It doesn't have to be, leaping off a cliff like Carlos Castaneda.
Yeah.
It's hard to go from 0 to 100 in a second. And there's nothing wrong with being more cautious.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But, the two attitudes that are so different from one another that are worth mentioning are an attitude that each second you're already there, you're already complete, everything is fine, you don't have to strive, your life is good, you've set it up, it's working, you can just feel good about it, and you don't need to prove it to yourself, you don't need to achieve anything else, just enjoy what you've got right now. And the other attitude is something's going to go wrong, and what is it? Where is the danger? Where's the threat vector? There's always going to be one. I have to be eternally vigilant, or this is going to be taken away from me. And that causes contraction and shrinkage. You're projecting imminent loss, and the universe is going to deliver what you expect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you're much better off to just enjoy what you've got right at the moment and be grateful for what you've got at the moment. And it brings more positive stuff into your existence, and things just keep getting better. Now, I'm accused all the time of being, overly optimistic and a Pollyanna-ish, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather be a little bit more that way wacky than the other way wacky.
Mm-hmm.
Balancing it is trickier than going all in one way or the other. It's so much easier to just become, either pushy, arrogant, or docile and go along with the mob. This constant thinking for oneself is quite a responsibility that we've taken upon ourselves, and it does work better in the absence of negativity. And that doesn't mean repressing negativity. It means understanding the sources of one's own negativity. As doubts arise and so on, giving them space and asking them in a friendly way, what are you really afraid of? What do you think could happen, and what makes you think it could happen?
Hmm.
And learning more about that alternate viewpoint helps disperse the negativity, because you start to form plans. You start to separate the negativity into some useful bits that came out of it that enable you to improve your game in certain areas. So, using the negativity and transmuting it into positive actions
Hmm.
is better than just repressing it. But the general thing is that we're all too negative too much of the time.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't work well.
Hmm. I know. I kind of think of us as like antennas, almost like a cell phone or something like that. And it's what we're putting out in our antenna is what we will attract towards us. And I know you said that you get accused of being optimistic most of the time, and I'm definitely the same. It's what's the worst that can happen? Like, yeah, it'll all be fine, right? And people think you're nuts and crazy half the time, but then it works, right? It works. So I'm kind of like, who's the crazy one? So no, but it's I guess for me though, and keen for your thoughts on this, is a balance, I think, between being optimistic and being confident that the universe will deliver it, and not stepping that line into like arrogance or what's the other one? Yeah, arrogance or kind of expectation. I think there's a line between being optimistic and believing that everything will go the way that you want it to go, and then, almost arrogance. Do you also believe there is a line there? And how do you manage that within yourself?
Well, there's definitely a danger of arrogance, to the extent that you have confidence in your own systems.
Hmm.
You begin to preach to other people, and sometimes can be taken as talking down to people,
Hmm.
from a higher place, and it can sneak up on you.
Hmm.
All of a sudden, you find yourself doing that, and you can't believe, how did I get into this? How did
Hmm.
I? Clearly, balance is crucially important, and a degree of humility, and we don't know for sure what's going to happen.
Hmm.
We're not perfect mind readers of God.
Hmm.
God is full of surprises
Hmm. Hmm.
and has a much longer term view of things.
Yeah. And I almost think when you get too carried away, that's when the rug will get pulled from underneath you. When you get a bit too cocky with it, it's like, oh yeah, this is going to work. So it is that balance. But funny you say there around like talking down to people, because I don't think it's ever meant necessarily. I think it comes from, oh, I want to share my experience. I want to share this knowledge with you, or this is the way my thought processes are. But I think there is a case of having to meet people where they're at, and sometimes we forget that because you view the world through your glasses, and you forget that people are still viewing them through those foggy glasses. And I guess trying to navigate that and meet people where they're at. How do you do that in your daily life, like through your work and yeah, both your businesses?
I think I always approach things in the most humble way I can.
Hmm.
So I don't characterize, these are things I know. I characterize, this works for me.
Hmm.
And, I just want to share it because it's been working for me. I don't want to impose it. Um, but I'd be thrilled if you would try it,
Hmm.
test it out.
Hmm.
In the case of the business world, there are some beliefs right now that quality of data is, Bill, you're being too obsessive about you want the highest quality of data. How about data that's good enough?
Mm-hmm.
We haven't got endless amounts of money to pay for the highest excellence of data.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I have to explain, well, here are the pieces of evidence that I've got that it makes a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Here's my evidence for why even small, what you would consider to be small degrees of error, maybe 5 or 10% error, actually change decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Because decisions are balanced very sensitively. The media tend to price themselves so as to be able to get the highest cost per thousand impressions they can get. And what it turns into is a situation where everyone is converging on this very, very close range of CPMs.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, a small difference flips decisions because
Mm-hmm.
everything is getting equalized by the CPM mentality.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
things are positioned so close to one another that quality of data is crucially essential because you're looking at tiny differences to make decisions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When you're saying that, it's just spiking up in my mind. So you say like when people are, you're kind of like laying out all the options, people are looking for the smallest difference in order to make that decision. And it just is because I was telling you just before we got on this call, I've been practicing for this pitch event, and one of the questions you always get asked is, what makes you different? Why are you different? And as you were talking there's so many. I don't think any idea really is necessarily that unique. What makes it different is you are you and they are them. And again, we're kind of coming full circle here a little bit, because I think certain people are hardwired and coded to be receptive to you and your energetic makeup. But as you were talking there, it's like that is the difference. When in business, that is the difference. The difference is the person or the people. And as you're talking about data there, what small differences are they looking for? Is it around how it's presented as well, and by who?
Well, advertisers and agencies and media nowadays are looking for solutions that are somewhat separated from human emotions, feelings. They're trying to make decisions as if the creative doesn't matter. What you say in the ad, the content of the ad doesn't matter. They're trying to ignore the relationship between an ad and the context, the media context in which it's placed.
Mm-hmm.
Like they just assume it can't have that much of a difference.
Mm-hmm.
An impression is an impression.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever we say in the ad, yes, it must make some difference. But the main thing is to keep the brand mentally available.
Mm-hmm.
So people are reminded of the brand, and therefore they see it on the shelf or whatever. It will increase the odds of them buying it. And let's not get too carried away by emotions or how this might fit within their mental structures or motivations. I mean, Bill, you're overcomplicating all this stuff, and it's cutting into our ability to negotiate the best price.
Mm-hmm.
What we really want is to get it wholesale. We want to pay a lower price than anybody else. That's what really counts. And I say, well, what about return on investment?
Mm-hmm.
ROI, the I, investment in ROI, is the CPM that you care about. So
Mm-hmm.
ROI overtakes CPM.
Mm-hmm.
CPM is subsumed by ROI. If you get a high return on investment, the CPM doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
The CPM could have been extremely high, but the sales were so high that it didn't matter.
Hmm.
What you really want is the relationship of what you got back for what you put in. You're
Hmm.
just talking about minimizing how much you put in.
Hmm.
That's, a bit short-sighted and non-holistic. So
Hmm.
we go around and around on that.
Yeah. It's almost like you're saying there, it's the shelf that they're putting it on. Essentially, it's not how many people walk past the shelf, it's how many people are interested in that shelf, in that shop. It's not how many people are walking past it. And again, that's hardwired in the way we are, right? So I think that's threading the whole science theme we're talking about, along with the convergence of our ideas, and that people resonate to certain things. In people like different shops. People like different shops, and they like different, products within those shops. So it's, I know you're kind of talking about brand and data, but I feel like it's all quite metaphorical, and it all, again, a convergence of ideas.
Well, the more abstract ways of dealing with people leave out so much information, and it's on purpose. It's like oversimplification,
Mhm.
emergency oversimplification procedure. It's, we've got to reduce all of this complexity. We can't deal with all this complexity, but the truth is you can deal with complexity. It requires more attention.
Mhm.
It takes more time. You do have to think it out. You do have to test things. You have to do reconnaissance. You have to search and seek information and try to put it all together. It isn't a quick, easy fix. And because of the speed of life, people are eager to get past the learning and to know it all, and then it's all settled.
Mhm.
They're seeking closure ahead of its natural time.
Mhm. Mhm.
It'd be better to remain without closure. Just
Mhm.
keep checking things out.
Mhm.
Study everything. Study every postulate, even the ones that feels wrong to me. Okay, why does it feel wrong? Abraham Lincoln said, "I do not like that man. I must get to know him better."
It's it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think what we don't understand, we tend to reject. It's almost like a, oh no, my brain can't go there. It's I don't understand it, so it's easier for me to say they're weird, they're crazy, I don't get them, and we reject it because actually I believe it's our world that we've created through the lens that we're looking. It actually shatters it. So it shatters the paradigm in which you're in. So it's easier to kind of reject that than it is to shatter your own paradigm and build it, build it from scratch.
That's beautifully said. I think that's a great way of looking at it,
Mhm.
and it makes me think that how much fun it's always been for me to have my worldview shattered. It's like, bring it on. I've, you know, I haven't had my worldview shattered yet today. You
Mhm.
know, I kind of miss it.
Yeah.
I,
Every time it's broken, I feel like the new pieces, the puzzle only gets better. I never get brought a worse puzzle after it's broken. And yes, that painful process of letting go, and everything that you thought, it's almost like I believe we're constantly evolving. We're in this constant evolution, and we're constantly having to let go and embrace the new. But I've never had to let go of something and wasn't brought something better in its place. I think that's it. When we talk about shattering paradigms, it's always replaced with something better.
it's being so introspective as a child,
Mhm.
I noticed that things that really disturbed me at the time, when I look back at them from a perspective of a year or two later, I saw how they made me better.
Mhm.
And so something was taken away, but the replacement in the long run was an improvement.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, I think that's it suggests to me that the universe is intelligent and benevolent, and that in
Mhm.
the long run, all of the suffering that we go through as a warrior race of constant warfare and intergroup hatreds and stuff, that all of this is in the long run going to make us much wiser and more ethical and moral and larger beings.
Mhm. It's all a lesson. I really believe that. Even if you can't see it in the moment, it's all a lesson. And to be able to look back retrospectively and look at all the lessons that you've learned, and you are the person you are today because of all those steps and all those lessons that you have taken along the way. And I always think like what you, I guess, the reality you experience today is a combination of your decisions and reflections and actions in the past, right? Have brought you to today's reality. And I think as long as you can always reflect and be introspective, like from any situation, what did you learn? My mom always said that to me as a child. She's like, as long as you learn, Natalie, it's not time wasted. And it's something that stuck with me my whole life. It's like you're always learning if you choose to learn, if you choose to reflect and look at it.
It's making those choices moment by moment, those courageous, open, non-contracted choices.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All choices. Sometimes you go, why have I made this choice? But it's all part of the plan, all part of the growth, all part of the growth. So um, here we are. We've ended up going completely off piste and not onto any of the questions I had here. But in terms of the salience network, you did explain to me that is just another way of kind of putting forward your mythologies, which is between like the observer and the EOP state. And for them, default network versus, I think you said, exert control network. Is that was the other one?
Executive control network. Yeah.
Executive control network. So when you said in your blog post as well, it's very easy to fall out of observer into EOP, and getting mad at yourself for doing that actually doesn't help you, and maintaining a sense of humor is the best thing to do. So for people that are taking more of an observer state or are noticing themselves, I think even whether it's through coaching, through meditation, or just even quiet time going for a walk, if they're noticing themselves observing their actions and reflecting more, if they do drop back into EOP, and I know that through some of the coaching work that I'm doing with businesses and stuff like that, when we're doing our check-ins, that they're almost annoyed at themselves because they're like, oh, I know better. Like we did this last time. Like I know better. And they kind of get frustrated with themselves that they've made a step or an action that wasn't aligned with what insight kind of came out for them. So I guess a long way of saying, I do think people are observing themselves more, but when they go back into EOP, how do you stop them? How should they stop themselves from beating themselves up? Because as you've said, getting mad at yourself is not going to be helpful.
Well, what I've been doing lately, when I notice the babbling going on in my mind, is I just observe it, and I know it for what it is. It's a neuron net in my brain that has been habituated to keep up a conversation with itself. And it's well intended, it's kind of like the overly helpful software systems that are popping up little suggestions all the time while you're trying to work, and you have to say "get it" in order to remove it from the screen. It's, you know, overly helpful, but not something to be angry at. It's part of myself. It's part of the universe. It's part of God. It's part of the one thing. We're all part of the same thing. So I, I'm more tolerant of it as long as I don't take ownership of it. So if I realize that my observer is still there and still in control, and it's just being tolerant of this, you know, puppy dog aspect of my mind that, you know, is babbling. It's cute, you know. It's not something for me to get angry at, and in fact, if I did, I would actually be joining into it and being absorbed by it, and it would be in control. So, you know, any reaction I give to it is going to give it more control. It's better to just, you know, live and let live, let it babble.
That, I think that's something that more people could learn from and try to embrace, because I found in doing this coaching work, you know, people are constantly in awe about, you know, they call it, it's like Jedi mind tricks and like some kind of sorcery that we're doing when we're coaching, because they kind of can't believe they come out of it and they're like, wow, right? And but this is it, they kind of come up with these realizations and these insights. And I truly believe, like, once you learn something, you can't unlearn it necessarily. Like, yes, in a moment you may react instead of taking a step back and responding. But I when I read this in your blog, it reminded me of people getting annoyed at themselves because they actually now know they've learned something. They understand why they've maybe reacted like that, but then they're annoyed with themselves that they've done it again. And I think it kind of goes back to this the idea of rewiring your brain. And I don't necessarily think it happens overnight. It's something that takes time and effort. So in order to get to that point that you are now at, where you don't get mad at yourself because you know it's only going to make things worse. I know what my answer is to this, but how long does it take to rewire one's brain where you don't get mad at yourself and you just accept it?
Years. Unfortunately, you know, but it gets better every day. You know, you see you're making progress every day. But willpower, self-mastery, self-control under, you know, we live in such a distractive environment, a lot of stuff happening at once, that it works against our ability to manage all this stuff and stay in our highest place. So to some extent, reducing the width of the front helps. So, for example, you're in a situation, you're in action, there's a lot of people involved, it's a big meeting, everybody's talking at once. You wouldn't necessarily want to jump in hastily or try to. You might even need to remain silent and absorb things and go away and ponder them and contemplate them, and then send a memo to everybody who was in the room saying, you know, at the time I was overwhelmed by all the good things that all the good points people were making, and I couldn't see the solution. But I've thought about it now, and I think what we should try to do is X, Y, Z. In other words, to the extent that you feel that you must react quickly, or something will be lost if you take your time and give it more time and space to figure out. The odds are against being able to function in a flow state under distraction conditions. And we have to live with the fact that we've got these distraction conditions going on constantly now. It's the nature of the culture. So, one of the new, I use these trigger words and trigger phrases to remind myself. One of my new, and usually they come in like as if from inspiration. They're not something I thought of. The one that came in recently was, don't become overly concerned. And I remember a friend of mine when I was a teenager saying almost the same thing. He said, "Don't sweat the small stuff." So not becoming overly concerned when you find that you've done something that isn't commensurate with your current level of evolution as you see yourself. You've gone past that, and now you've just fallen back, and you're disappointed in yourself. Well, you were probably distracted. And don't become overly concerned by it. Just figure out, how come it snuck past you? Was there any kind of a signal or a warning that you didn't pay attention to internally? What can you learn from it, as your mom said? What's the lesson? As opposed to beating yourself up. I have this whole chapter in Mind Magic about, don't keep score. It's not about keeping score. You don't have to constantly rate yourself and berate yourself. Billy Good Boy, Billy Bad Boy. It's more babble, really.
It is. It's what do you learn? Yeah, and I find, just as you're saying there, I find that the difference between respond and react. I think when we react, that's the EOP state. That's just us, automatically not even thinking. And but when we respond, it's well, my connotations of it, it's a more mindful process. And it doesn't always, I don't think it always needs to take a long time, because I think, in society, it's always like, oh, it's very go, go, go. And and that's why I believe so many people are in EOP, because they're not even thinking, they're just reacting all the time. But this idea of responding, I feel that that's different, and it's more mindful, and it doesn't necessarily need to take a long time, but you're processing information before responding to it.
Yes. I found out a long time ago that I was very impulsive. I never thought of myself that way, but all of a sudden I realized I'm acting on impulses. And that's kind of like taking a shortcut. And it would be different if those impulses always worked. But the fact that they don't often work should be a clue. And so I dialed back on the impulsiveness. And it really gets tricky when you're on the fringe of flow state and you're moving in and out of flow state, flipping back and forth. Because in flow state, you aren't hesitant. You are reacting in a sense without thinking, because it's actually doing itself. So that observer state gap that you purposely maintain in order to give yourself more processing power before you commit to an action, that strategy gets subsumed by flow state, and you could get confused. You could say, hey, I'm acting impulsively, which would definitely bring you right out of flow state. So you have to recognize that flow state is a special case where, as long as it's doing itself and it's all positive, you can go with the flow. But the thing to look out for is anything that's got any negativity in it. And like when I was on stage at, I don't know, my father and I had this stand-up comedy act, and I did it like a little robot, for I don't know how long, but eventually I got into the flow state, and And it was cute when the photographer was moving from the front of the stage to stage right, and I was kind of hamming it up purposely for for the photographer. It was cute, but then in a later situation, I was kind of imitating myself, and it took me right out of the flow state. And what was negative about it was the arrogance. That it was a
Yep.
moment of arrogance that brought me out of the flow state, and thinking that I could just do the same trick again and it would work just the same way. No, it's not that way. The trick works the first time, but it doesn't necessarily work every time after that. Imitating yourself is not a good strategy.
It is. And as you're talking about it, I totally get what you're saying, right? And I just find it's so difficult to articulate to other people unless you're experiencing that, because it's like, don't just react in a way, and don't not think about it. But at the same point, when you're in flow, it is this impulse. It feels almost impulsive, because I've got told that so many times on Natalie, like, you didn't even think twice about just moving country or quitting your job, or like it can look impulsive, but I know it's a gut feeling. It's a direction, and I think of it like a river, and the path of least resistance is just to jump in rather than try to swim upstream. It's like, just get in the river and it'll take you where it's meant to go. But it's trying to articulate that to other people. It's not just reacting and flapping and jumping in any river. It's jumping in your river rather than trying to jump into the first one that you see.
Telepathy and precognition exist, and it depends on how you're wired, and you can wire yourself to be more open to it, by not denying its possibility, and by being more aware of hunches, and so when something is just right for you and other people can't see it, but you know it deep down inside, and it's just, this is you, this is the universe guiding you. It just feels so right. There can't be any doubt about it. That's kind of a telepathic, precognitive thing that people are cutting themselves off from. So they can't understand it because they haven't experienced it. And so it is hard to explain these things to people who haven't experienced them. And as you said before, meeting them where they are, if you can pay enough attention to them and where they are right now, and feel what they're feeling, you can intuit the right metaphors that will speak to their experience.
Because I think that's, and I don't know if you have ever experienced this, because I think that's something, if you maybe specifically with like family or people though they're really close to you, and you forget you're wearing these glasses, and then you almost get annoyed with them because they're not seeing the world through your glasses. And so then what you are actually doing is subconsciously asking them to see something that they can't see, and then getting annoyed with them because they can't see it. So you're disappointed and they're disappointed. And I like that's I think it is a blessing that we see the world through these glasses. But again, you cannot drag people kicking and screaming, and to be able to meet them where they're at and lose that frustration, because I think it's almost the price you pay for wearing these glasses and having this mindset, is that not everybody is going to get it or understand it, and part of the learning is being okay with that.
Well said. Well said.
But we want to give people the glasses. We want to give them the glasses. That's what we want to do. So there was a gift and a Christmas gift. There you go. So yeah, it's
Try them on. They look good on you.
Exactly. So, but I love having conversations with you because you totally get it, and it's it reminds me of that. As there was an analogy, it's like about, I think, I'm not sure if I said this before, but it was like a bottle of water in the supermarket, you pay 50 cents for it. If in I don't know, in the gas station, you might pay a little bit more. And then at the cinema, you pay like, what's it? You pay $10 for a bottle of water. And it's like, it's not that the product has changed. The value is just changed because of its environment and who it's around and where it is. And I think for anybody that feels misunderstood or feels that, people don't get them or they're not seeing the world the way they are, I think it's not that you don't have value. You're just in the wrong place probably, or around the wrong people,
I think that the world has got so much possibility in it, and we tend to restrict our movements to the familiar, and we don't try out enough different things, and then when we do it, it's so exhilarating, and we learn so much so quickly. That's why people say travel is broadening, because all of a sudden you're just learning at a far faster rate and meeting all kinds of people so different from the people you've been used to. It's so creative. It gives you so much fuel for your own creativity and growth.
Do you believe there's a ceiling to it, or do you think we'll just end up like I don't know. Do you think there's a ceiling to how much you can elevate your consciousness?
No, I think even God is getting smarter all the time.
Yeah.
I think part of the game that he's playing through us is making him smarter, her smarter.
I feel like I'm going to be a messiah by the time I'm 80. I'll be like, like I don't know, see-through hologram or something. I'm not sure. Yeah, it's that's part of the joy of life. There's always another level to unlock, isn't there?
I think it's infinite. I think it really is infinite.
It reminds me of what my mum said about having 3 kids. She's like, once I had you, she's like, but I thought there's no way I can love your brothers the same way as I love you, because I was the first child. And then my brother came along, and guess what? There was more love, and my second brother, and there was more love. And I feel that, I feel that about every coaching client. I kind of just love them. It's like I love them, and then I'm like, oh, but they're not going to be the same as that next. But they are, and there's more of them, and there's just more people to love. And I just think it is infinite, and it's incredible.
Well, we're luckier than most.
Yeah, definitely.
But we're sharing it.
Yeah,
as best we can. Infinite love.
Yeah. I know. Sorry, I ended up not asking half of the questions there that I had written down, but I always find it just kind of flows. So hopefully George gets something from that. I think we talked about quite a lot.
Well, let's do another one sooner than usual, and we can go back to those questions and any other questions.
Yeah.
I think we left too much time because we knew, we're not going to run out of stuff that soon. We don't have to think that way. It's too much fun. Let's do this again, like in 3 weeks or something.
No, definitely. This is it. I just do this because I love talking to you, and I get carried away, and I'm like, I know I've got questions written down here, but I'm like so into what we're talking about. I'm like, I want to ask another question. So
I think it's best.
Yeah. I will try and stick to some of them, because I know there's some things I'm like, right. Yeah. But I found it really interesting, even just talking about the science and like the convergence of ideas, because that is really exciting, I think, because again, the people that don't get our woo-woo stuff and aren't necessarily hard coded into that, rather than us, because sometimes I feel like you have to kind of change the way you say it, or be careful around how you put it across, just because otherwise they kind of poo-poo you like from the off. And I think just to be having more people or just something else that kind of validates it is going to be a good thing for us, I think.
It will definitely be a good thing. And science becoming more open-minded about these issues is going to make science so much more powerful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we need that, because we need the medical cures, and we need to be able to deal with people who are really mentally unstable, and they need more than coaching. They need, deep psychoanalysis and possibly chemicals.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's yeah, I'm so hopeful though, because I do see, and maybe it's just the way me and you see the world, but I do see it changing. And I don't know whether it's I'm just attracting more people that are more open, but I genuinely believe there's people that are almost just so exhausted with the minutia and I don't know, because I don't really feel like I live in that world, but I think the world, they're tired and exhausted with it. So I do think it's almost pushing people to be more open, because they think, well, what is there to lose at this point? It's almost pushing them to a point of it's so bad for them that they're open to trying anything for this to be, for this to be possible. And it's sad that it might need to get to that point, but if it pushes them to be open about something that they wouldn't have been open about before, then again, I think it's a good thing.
Definitely a good thing. Even COVID had
Mm-hmm.
positive effects by getting people to reassess their workaday lives. Like, why am I doing this work? It's not my passion work.
Mm-hmm.
Why did I never pursue my passion work?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I should. A lot of people thinking that way would
Mm-hmm.
never have been thinking that way without this horrible pandemic. So
Mm-hmm.
even the horrible pandemic
Mm-hmm.
has had some positive effects.
Definitely. And you don't want to push people to a point, but sometimes that's the way, and that's the way it happens. And I believe people wake up when they're meant to wake up, and we're all part of that plan, and we're meant to wake up when we were to help the others. And I always see that it's like you save yourself, and then you put the rope down to save others. And I feel that's what we're doing throughout our work. We're putting the rope down, and we're going to get a lot of people. That's it. Yeah.
I agree with you. I think it will, the shape of the curve will change dramatically. It's
Mm-hmm.
been, I don't know, 50 years since people, transcendental meditation, est, silva mind control, all of the earlier groundwork that was done back in the last century, that they always said things like, oh, once we get 3% of the population meditating, then it's going to start to gain faster.
Mm-hmm.
The curve will shoot upward, and the whole population will wise up much faster once we get to a certain inflection point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we maybe are coming to the inflection point, seeing what's happening with science and
Mm-hmm.
people reconsidering their lives
Mm-hmm.
in ways that were impossible for them to conceive of before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think of it a bit like the whole thing around, paracetamol, or whatever you call it in the US, I think Tylenol, or whatever the paracetamol versus vitamins, right? And it's like one is a preventative, measure. It'll take your vitamins and do all this stuff, and then the sale of paracetamol, there's a problem and people want to solve it, right? So like that always does a lot better than an aspirational state. And I think because now the problem is so bad, it's like, well, there's a problem to solve. It's not an aspirational state anymore. It's like, I literally need to solve this now. And it's almost like there's no choice. They're gonna take the paracetamol because I guess what I'm trying to say is like the problem versus prevention. People act more when there's a problem rather than to prevent it. And I think that's where we're at in terms of humanity. I think the problems are too great for them not to act, almost.
Well said. Great insight.
No, no. There they are. They just keep coming out, and here was us. We finished. This is when all the good stuff happens, when you're not even not even thinking. So yeah, that's it. I'm always worried. I'm like, what's George going to put out? I hope I've not said anything that I we're like, yeah, the pandemic was great. Like, it's yeah, don't put that in. Yeah. Oh no, that's so nice talking with you always. And yeah, let's not leave it as long for our next one. And yeah, I'll be back out in February, so we'll catch up when I'm back, definitely.
Looking forward to that a lot.
Yeah, no, it'll be great. It'll be so great. And I don't know, there's something about New York City. It's got that buzz, doesn't it? It just has that, I don't know, that energetic, I don't know, buzz and connection and attraction around it. I like being there.
Me too. It's got an electricity, and it's the only place in the world where your entire life can change based on one meeting. It happens all the time.
Yeah. I find that, like, I find that in London as well. Like, whenever I'm in the city, I don't know, I obviously lived there, and I think 12 months of the year is too much. I need green, and I need like a beach and some kind of space. But I always love it. I just love the busyness and like the bustle, and it is that thing. You're just one person away from like changing the whole course of your life. That's what it feels like, right? And because I'm like, this is where things happen. This is a place where things happen, and they know somebody that can actually make something happen. And yeah, I think New York's very like that as well.
I agree.
Yeah.
I love London too.
Yeah. How's everything with the movie coming along?
Currently, it's we've been trying to test out all of the new AI tools, the generative AI tools, and so far, I mean, Midjourney can make wonderful still pictures, and we can get the characters. We can get all of the characters in Agents of Cosmic Intelligence. We've got good AI pictures of them, but then placing them in different contexts with the right background and the right action and getting things to move, the AI systems aren't there yet.
Difficult.
And I can see some ways of improving it, like if you could create stick figures and have the stick figures move, and then you just wrap the body around them. So you've got the character bodies, but the thing that defines the action is, it's kind of like in ballet. They have a notation in ballet where all of the ballet movements can be described in a chart. Labo notation, it's called. After the guy Labon, I think, a Frenchman who invented it. So something like that could speed up the ability to use AI to create this Agents of Cosmic Intelligence series. The alternative, though, is to work with film schools, and actors in film schools, and new kids coming into the business. Certainly, the equipment is affordable now to do, very high definition capture, super HD. You can afford the cameras. So one way or the other, we're gonna get there, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen this year.
Not a this year thing. Well, let's say it's you. At least you've been starting to kind of really test it out, and it's just seeing what your options are, isn't it, really? And like you say, it will happen. It's just a matter of when. It's not if, it's when. So, and it'll all happen in divine timing, exactly when it's meant to be. And we're just not to get frustrated that it hasn't happened yet. Yes, universe, you know best. So no, but that it's good. I'm glad that you're still exploring, and I have no doubt. I have no doubt that it will happen. So I can't wait.
Me too.
Oh, right. Well, Bill, I'll let you go and enjoy the rest of your day in New York State. And yeah, I'll head off, and we'll speak again in a few weeks.
Looking forward to it.
So nice
Love
speaking with you.
you.
I'll send the recording, okay?
Oh, you'll send it to me and
I'll
George?
send, I'll
Great.
send it to you and George. Just as soon as it's downloaded, I'll send it today.
Thank you.
All righty. We'll speak soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.